So today I want to talk about some of the cons of living in Japan and some of the pros too. And maybe some of the cons are actually pros. It just depends on how you look at it. Let's get at it. One of the disadvantages that you notice pretty quickly when you live in Japan is having to take your shoes off at the door. I mean, if you take your shoes off at the door, that means that the house or the school or whatever gets less dirty. And if the place is less dirty, then that means that you don't have to clean it. If you don't have to clean it as much, then that means you're not getting your exercise. And that means that you're becoming more and more unhealthy because you're not moving. You take your shoes off at the door. Your house is clean. You don't need to do any cleaning or less cleaning. Yeah, all right, maybe that's not the big deal about having to take your shoes off at the door. Actually, it's a good idea. It is sometimes kind of a pain because you go out and you realize, oh, I forgot my something. Oh. And if you have shoes that aren't easy to take on and off, or you can't just like pop them on and pop them off, you know, you have to like kind of struggle to get when you fall and you like, yeah. So it can be kind of a pain sometimes, but mostly it's not a bad thing. Another con to living in Japan is toilets, bathrooms, restrooms, whatever you call them. Now, Japanese bathrooms and toilets are, in general, in my experience, the absolute best. But the problem with them is that because they're the absolute best, I mean, like, they're clean. In Japan, at least, you're not usually limited to squatter toilets. Every once in a while that happens, but very rarely. They're pretty set with the Western style toilets, as they call them, which actually they call them ocean style, but it means what we would call Western style. Not only are they clean, but you can always flush the toilet paper down them. You don't have to, as in several other countries that I've lived in, have to take that paper and put it in the rubbish bin next to you. And so there's this rubbish bin next to you with used toilet paper that, yeah, you have to get really good at breathing through your nose in places where you have those kinds of toilets. So you see, you go into these Japanese bathrooms, they're the best. They're absolutely wonderful. They have heated seats. If you like the water splashing for cleaning purposes, you can use that stuff. They're almost everywhere. Even my home toilet, it doesn't have all the water splashy stuff, but it has heated seats. Wow. Japanese toilets are great. So what's the con about Japanese toilets then? The con is this. You get used to that. Then you go anywhere else in the world and you're like, oh, yeah, it's a problem because, you get too used to these great bathrooms and then you're spoiled. It's a problem. Sugi. What is sugi? Sugi is a Japanese cedar tree. Apparently what happened was that after World War II, in a rush to rebuild all the forests all the trees that were burnt up because of the war, they planted some fast-growing trees, like boatload of sugi trees that they planted. There came, after a certain number of years, a boatload of pollen. Fast-growing trees, apparently, this is what I heard, that fast-growing trees produce a lot of pollen. With a boatload of pollen in the air comes a boatload of hay fever. Pollen in Japanese is actually flower powder, and then hay fever is flower powder illness. That makes sense, huh? Hay fever. I wonder where they came up with hay fever. But anyway, I went back and I double checked my facts to make sure I wasn't making up a story for you. And I checked with the Wikipedia, the authority. Another con of Japan is small sizes. For example, clothes. I mean, it's not just Japan, actually, although Japan is probably the smallest Asians that I have experienced in the Asian countries that I've lived in. The thing with Asians, though, is there are some that are just as tall, weigh just as much as I do, may have the same height and weight, but their structure is narrow. So me, with my kind of going on, trousers especially are really hard to find. Yeah. Small sizes are a problem. And there's not only that, there's backhoes. The backhoe that was in the place next door. Yeah, I don't know what that little backhoe can really do. It looks like a toy. So I'm not even sure I'd fit in the seat. But it's not just that. It's also Starbucks, for example. The Starbucks at the Chubu airport that I would go to quite regularly in Nagoya when I lived in that area. The sizes are like, well, sizes. So yeah, and it's like $5 for some tiny little size. I don't remember the exact price, but yeah, very small sizes of many things. Many things, like the vegetable juice packages. You know, it's like, this is like good for a 5-year-old perhaps. And actually, I don't know if that's a total con, because especially when it comes to food portion sizes, maybe having smaller food portion sizes isn't so bad. Boots. I don't think I've ever worn, well, I think when I was a kid, I wore boots. In my early elementary school years in upstate New York, I'd wear those, I had those rubber boots that went over the top of your shoes, as I recall. But all my years of living in Russia and Korea, as well as upstate New York and Michigan, I never had to have boots before. Now, I happen to have some like furry boots with fur inside that I had inherited from a friend, but I carried them around for a few years before I actually used them. So I finally realized, it's kind of cold here, so maybe I'll start wearing those. So I started wearing the fur boots, but that wasn't good enough, because what happened was there was one day when, there's a lot of snow, and then there's another problem. Ugh. Maybe the problem isn't actually boots. Maybe the problem is actually the fact that they're not great at snow removal, in this part of the country at least. Many places do not do a good job of snow removal, including where I teach at the school. And it's not inside the school itself, although that isn't great either, because there's like these water puddles that easily develop that I have to walk through. There's like no way to go around them. And then in order to get to the parking lot, I couldn't go the shortcut because they had shoveled the snow into the corner where the shortcut was. So I had to walk around through this snow that's this thick, that's melting. And so needless to say, my furry boots got sopping wet. The rest of that day, wearing these sopping, well, I didn't have to wear the boots. I took the boots off. I had sopping wet socks. I was just sopping wet in there. Put them in front of the heater to dry them out. But then I decided that day on the way home from work, I am going directly to the store where I know I can buy rubber boots. And I bought these rubber boots that are about almost knee height. Yeah, restaurants, major grocery stores, or not major grocery stores, banks, convenience stores, apartment complexes, my own apartment complex, Inky Dinky Eikaiwas. Yeah, my apartment complex and my Inky Dinky Eikaiwa. Yeah, those were two places that I did a lot of snow shoveling this year. My own apartment complex. The people in this complex don't remove the snow. I was afraid my car was going to get stuck in this snow. It's like, yay, can't fit my hands in the screen there, but it was like yay deep. So I cleaned the snow up in my part, like my 1/3 of the parking lot. Yeah, there are only like 10 apartments in this complex. So yeah, it's not a big place. But still, I am like basically the only one. Now, the guy below me does do a little bit sometimes. And I noticed that one of the people on the other end did some snow removal. If I look out there to all the houses that are around me, you never see a young person out there shoveling. It's all of us old geezers out there shoveling. I don't know why those young people don't shovel the snow. And those people that are living in this apartment complex, they're all young people. They don't shovel. What's up with that? Like, get the snow out of the way. It melts a lot faster that way. Then you're not driving through the slush, and you're not driving through the snow, and you're not driving through the ice because it melts faster. I don't know. Yeah, they don't do snow removal. I mean, and some places do. You can tell the places that do, because they still have, even though we've had like about a week and a half, probably maybe a couple of weeks of like, for winter, warmish weather, above zero weather. Sorry, that's Celsius. So Fahrenheit above freezing. We can just say above freezing. And they still have a pile of snow. Somebody told me that in this area, I don't know if it's true everywhere, but like the officials, somebody, I don't know exactly who, but they're so proud because they're in the black. The money that they bring in, they have a lot left over. And the person's point was like, well, okay, it's good that you're not in the red, but why aren't you using that money? Like, how about some snow removal? But it's not just the public places that need the snow removal. It's also private places, like the grocery stores and the convenience stores and places like that. Many of them don't clean the snow. So actually, maybe the con here is the lack of snow removal. Now, here's another thing that I found interesting when I moved to Japan, like back in 2013. I was here for a couple of years, and then I left for a few years, and then I came back again this time. But when I came in 2013, I came from Korea, after a couple of years in Korea, and I came to Japan, and I was kind of surprised by a couple of things. One was they're so far behind in technology. Now they, of course, create the technology, so they've got the technology. I got on the train. They were all using flip phones, where in Korea they were all using smartphones. Flip phone? What? I've heard that their flip phones were actually high technology flip phones, so they were used to them and liked them. They can watch TV on them and they can use the internet on them and that kind of thing. So I had a flip phone for a while there when I first came, before I got my smartphone. And yeah, they are not like smartphones. So anyway, they're getting caught up now, but they're really technologically, they are behind, despite Toshiba's and the Sonys and the other big technology companies that Japan has. For example, Wi-Fi. You rarely can find a place where you can get free access to Wi-Fi. Rarely. There's not a lot of Wi-Fi available, even though it's theoretically a high-tech country. It's kind of shocking. So another thing perhaps related to the lack of technology, that at least kind of how I see it, is cash society. It's a cash society. So like I said, I came from Korea and they all use cards for paying for everything. And when I came to Japan, it's all cash. And yet, you have limited ATM access. The ATMs, like my bank's ATM, are open these short amount of times. So I remember one Sunday I wanted to get some cash, and it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No, it's closed. Now, there are other ways to get money out from other ATMs, but you probably get charged, and I don't know. I try to just get it from my own bank's ATM, because then I know I'm not going to get charged for it. So now, in this year, they're scheduled to have a tax hike, a sales tax hike. The sales tax is supposed to go up from 8% to 10% this year. For certain things, if you don't use cash, if you use a card, I think they're trying to get for this to not be an entirely cash society. They're trying to get people to shift to use cards and different things or their phone to pay for things. Supposedly, like, stores are going to give you points back if you use a card to pay, or, some other electronic means to pay rather than using cash. So that leads into another problem that I have encountered, and that is being able to get a debit card or a credit card in Japan. I have not been able to do it. I've made a few attempts at it, and no. So I'm going to have to look around and find something. I did see that my bank has a kind of debit card, but you can't use it with Amazon. Amazon doesn't accept it. But anyway, so I'm going to have to look into how I can deal with that, because I'm going to want my 2% back if I can get it. Right, now here's another thing that I find as a con. These weird intersections where you come to this 4-way intersection, and only this direction, for example, has a stop sign. This or a light. This one can go through. But in one of the cases that I had where I drive through regularly, I can't see. I'm on the stop side, so I have to stop. But then I have to inch my way out into the intersection to be able to see if anybody's coming. I don't know why they didn't just make it a 4-way stop. There are a lot of intersections like that are just 2-way stop. So there are these mirrors. So I guess the advantage to that is that you get used to being able to tell which direction someone's coming, what side of the road they're on, even though they're in the mirror. I don't know. It's not great because you can't see great with those mirrors. You can't see if someone's walking or riding a bike very well. You can see if there's a car coming, but sometimes what side of the road are they on? Let me think. Okay. We are in Japan, so that means they're going to be on the left side of the road. So yeah, people like me, we got problems like that. Now another con is having to stop at railroad tracks. You have to stop at all the railroad tracks. It's a requirement. Oh, whoops, don't tell the cops, but I did mess it up one time. And another time I almost messed it up. Whoa, stop. You're in Japan, you gotta stop. No mindlessness allowed at railroad crossings. You have to stop and then pull out, right, to go through the railroad crossing. And so it's kind of interesting. Sometimes I'm just gonna pull out when the lights start flashing, ding, it starts dinging, dinging, dinging. And then other times I've been in the middle when it starts flashing and dinging, 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 dinging. Better hurry. If you get stuck on the railroad track, of course, that could be a problem if you get stuck, right? So they have this emergency button that you can hit, and it'll inform the train that's coming. You're stuck on the railroad track, just so that they know. I'm going to have a cons part 2 video because I can't fit it all in here. I hope that you've learned something about Japan, that you found something interesting in here, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to hear or if you've experienced something different than this, and see you in part 2.